Hello and welcome to another episode of the Impactful Introvert Podcast. Today, my guest, Marisa, is a copy coach and she helps coaches and creatives craft their uncopyable message inside her signature program, the Copy Confidence Society. I'm an alumni of. She is also a creator of the wildly popular summit, the Copy Chat, which has raised over $120,000 for organizations like Soulfire Farm, the Headstrong Project, and Sage USA. So, this conversation was very illuminating. And yeah, I have amazing guests. However, this is the first time I am talking about copy as it pertains to your content. So, the entire conversation is super valuable. Have a pen and paper if this is where you want to end it and you just want to get a taster. However, if you really want to dive deep into just what we have spoken in this episode, I want you to sign up for the Leave 'em Wanting masterclass, which is coming up in just a week. So sign up for that, get even more in depth information about all that we talked about. We talked about what makes your copy really connect. How can you make your copy go farther for the longest time? And how can you make it easy on yourselves as business owners, not content creators, to create content that connects and converts? So, without taking more time, here's Marisa. Hey, Marisa, thank you for coming.
Mm.
I have been looking forward to our conversation. So, welcome to the Impactful Introvert Podcast. Please tell our introverted listeners a little bit about yourself and all the amazing things that you do with respect to copy, especially.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, so I always say that copy isn't the icing on the cake, that it is the cake. It's the butter,
Mhm.
it's the gluten-free flour if you're gluten-free like me. Um, it's the eggs. It's how all the things you want to have happen in your business start to come to life. You want to sell in a way that feels good, you want to call in the right people to sell to, then you have to understand what to say and how to say it so that you can call in the right people to sell to. And that's what we do inside of our signature program called the Copy Confidence Society. Is we help business owners uncover what we call your uncopyable message and the personality filled copy that dazzles. And that's what we do inside of the Copy Confidence Society. We've supported over 1,000 business owners in there.
I am one of the alumni, and okay, I had listened to you for the first time on Leave 'em Wanting Masterclass
Mm-hmm.
because I follow Sophia Para and she recommended. So I listened to you and then I was like, this is great. And it stayed with me, but I couldn't like figure out if that was the right thing. I was in another program and then I listened to you again. And this time on the first itself, I joined you on the first masterclass that you had, and I signed up immediately on there because right during the webinar, I was sold on it the first time I listened to you. And it fit perfectly with my desire to improve my messaging.
Mm.
And I wanted to, I was connecting with people, but I wanted to connect in a way that they would feel the same feelings that I was when I listened to your masterclass. And I will tell you, after joining CCS, I was surprised that it's not just messaging, it's not just a sales page copy. You share with us how to use words in every single aspect of our business, whether it is website, whether it's sales page, whether it is all kinds of emails, launch sequences, everything. So I was I was wowed literally
Mm.
as to how helpful CCS is. And that is one of the reasons I was so looking forward to having you here because it is one of the biggest struggles of my people, of introverts, of
Mm.
how do you show up? Like being visible, being vulnerable online is hard as it is.
Mm.
And then we overthink as to how can we share what we do, who we are, how we can help in a way that the person who's reading can connect with. And I want you to help our listeners how they can start feeling more confident about being visible online through their content.
Mm, yeah, I think, you know, the, one of the biggest things that I'll hear from people is, we know how to be ourselves, like in our real life. And so sometimes the advice that you get in your copy and such is like, oh, just be yourself. And it's like, well, you know how to do that in your real life, but sometimes it's hard to know what aspects of that you should bring into your copy, especially if you are more introverted, right? You think, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell my whole life story on the internet or every detail that I'm doing or feel like I have to be on all the time. So it's really important to understand like what are those parts that you want to share, what is going to like conserve your energy. There's a lot of layers to it that I think people kind of skip over and just say like, oh yeah, be yourself. So some of the things, as you know, Seema, that we focus on inside of the society is, well, if we back up for a second, we have to remember that people make purchasing decisions based on two things. One is what you're selling, something that I want or I need. That's your messaging. So when people ask you what you do, is it clear and specific how you can help people? And number two, are you the person that I want to do it with? Do I get a sense of your voice, your vibe, your personality? Which is why your personality and your copy is so important. But how do we do that in a way that feels authentic to us and doesn't feel kind of put on or like we're mimicking someone else's voice? And so that's really like a big focus for us in the society, is to support you and really being authentic to who you are so that you can show up in a stronger way.
Yeah, authenticity is it's an overused word, but for introverts, it just feels easier to be who you are because then you're not thinking about all the facade that you have to keep up already while feeling like your energy is being drained, trying to do all the hacks and tactics and tips that will get you visible. So, yes, it is. From experience, I can say it was the big, like almost one third of it was figuring out how I can put my true authentic self in my content without feeling like I am oversharing or without overthinking about is this good enough, will is this going to be
Mm.
likable, etc. So thank you so much, that was so helpful. I know I can always revisit copy confidence for more details, but for the benefit of our listeners, can you share a couple of ways that they can make their content more engaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first thing is that it is not actually a copy tip, it's a messaging tip. So the first thing is, if you're out there listening, you're like, oh, okay, she's gonna give me some copy tips, let me like get my pen and paper or ready, and I can give you all the copy tips in the world, and I'm happy to. But a lot of times people will go straight to the copy, and I always say, as you've heard me say, Seema, that a solid 80% of the time, you don't have a copy problem, you have a messaging problem. So we always have to check back in with your messaging first. So this is why people might say, oh, I use this swipe copy or I use this template, but it didn't work for me. And so then you think, oh, maybe you're not great at what you do, or the person who sold it to you isn't great at what they do. And both are false. You're great at what you do. The person who sold it to you is great at what they do. And it's not your fault, because messaging is often left out of a copy conversation. But the best copy cannot fix a muddied message. So we have to check in and make sure that your messaging feels on brand and is clear and specific. So the very first thing you want to do is, if you're out there and you're listening, I want you to think about, like, when people ask you what you do you know how to say that in a sentence or two that's clear and specific? Or do you find yourself kind of like rambling, like, oh my gosh, I still feel like I'm speaking and nobody gets what I do? And you want to check there first. If you feel like what you're saying is clear and specific, it's like, okay, great. We can get into the copy tips. If not, we want to say, okay, is there one more layer of specificity you can add in there? And the way that we do that in the society is through a system with a little help from the Ghostbusters. Because I believe the Ghostbusters have the most perfect messaging. You know who you're going to call, you know when you call them. There's even a song about it. So there's 4 P's you can kind of check in with your messaging. And the reason we have the 4 P's is we call it the Proton Pack messaging playbook, because If you remember from the Ghostbusters, they wore that little laser backpack, and that's what they used to fight the ghosts. And that's what we use inside of the society. It's called the Proton Pack Messaging Playbook, and there's 4 Ps. So you want to ask yourself, okay, there's person. Okay, who is the person? Do we need to make the person more specific a bit? I'll give you an example of this in a second. The product, like what is it that you are, like what is the specificity around that, like specific, let's say you're a coach. Is it like you're a health coach or a financial coach? Like what's the specificity around the product there? And then the purpose is like the outcome, like what is the kind of promise or those results. And perspective, the P of perspective doesn't always end up in your messaging, but it informs how we get there. So I'll give you an example. So it's someone who came into the society, and they were a health coach, and they were really kind of focused on nutrition, but they could help people in a variety of ways with nutrition. But when they walked themselves through the Proton Pack and looked at their own perspective, which was that they had really used nutrition to really uncover what to eat and when to eat it, to break through to their migraine-free life. And they realized, oh, okay, why aren't I talking about that? Instead of being in generalized health coaching, I need to focus on something more specific. And so when they walked themselves through the P's, really the P's that were standing out for them was the P of product and the P of purpose. I say this to say that like, this person didn't need to then make the P of person so specific within an inch of its life. It didn't need to be like helping, moms with toddlers uncover what to eat and when to eat it to break through to their migraine-free life, because the P of product and the P of purpose were so specific. So you want to just run through the Proton Pack. And it doesn't need to be like every single P is super specific, but saying, can I go one more layer of specificity here? Like for this person saying, hey, instead of just saying, hey, I'm a nutrition coach, it's like actually what I really want to support people doing is uncovering what to eat and when to eat it to break through to your migraine-free life and really focus in on those, the migraines and the headaches that are impacting people. So that's something you can do for your messaging. And then from a copy standpoint, there's a few things you can do to make your content more engaging once you have a specific message that people can really sink their teeth into. And then from there, I would say one of the biggest things that I always love to tell people is to create what I call your word closet. So your word closet is, if you think about, and you got to step away from like your marketing self for a second and look at like text messages that you send loved ones, a partner in your life, a spouse, friends, family, things that you send in emails to people that know you, and start to look at like some of those like repeated words or phrases. I always say if you have kids in your life, thinking about what they repeat, what they say to you, because it's likely stuff that they're like repeating back to you. And so making a list of these words, and I'll give you an example of this in a second. And then at the same time, making a list of what we call your accessories closet, which is making a list of like your favorite things. Now, you don't have to know how you'll use them just yet, but making a list of like your favorite cookie or your favorite drink or whatever it is. Again, you don't need to know exactly how you'll use it, but making a list of those favorite things. So now you can go through copy that might seem kind of generic. This is especially helpful if you're using something like ChatGPT or AI, and it kind of spits back something that's super generic. You can start to go through and sub out the generic stuff with the stuff that's more specific. So for example, when people join my email list, instead of saying at the top, like, oh, hi, Seema, so glad that you joined the email list. Here's the subject lines or whatever our free gift is. I can make that feel more like me by putting things from my word closet and my accessories closet. So when you join my email list, it says, holy white chocolate covered Oreos at Christmas, Seema. I'm so jazzed you're here. White chocolate covered Oreos is my favorite cookie. Only can be found at Christmas time. And jazz is from my word closet. So now, just from the beginning of that email, I say, holy white chocolate covered Oreos at Christmas, Seema. I'm so jazzed to have you here. As promised, here's access to the 50 plus scroll stopping subject lines, which is our free gift. Just that small tweak at the top of that email gives that person who's experiencing me for the first time an idea of my personality without me sharing my whole life story, without me having to like tell every aspect of my life. It gives you an idea of me, of who I am. And these are very simple ways that I'll tell people, Let's go through a generic email and let's see if we can sub some of our most, so instead of saying, I'm excited you're here, I say jazzed a lot. So let's put jazzed in the place of excited. And we can use our accessories closet to take away from like cliched statements. So instead of saying like, yeah, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, I can be like, I'm flying by the seat of my, Spanx leggings or whatever I'm wearing, right? You can start to sub in those things that are right to you. Or, sometimes people will say like, those, you'll hear statements like, hold my beer or something like that people will say. And I've used this before where I'll say, okay, here's the results. Instead of saying hold my beer, here's the results from the Copy Confidence Society, I'd say hold my Earl Grey tea with a splash of half and half Seema, because here come the results from the Copy Confidence Society. And again, you get a sense of who I am without me having to like overshare or share every aspect of who you are, which I think is really helpful if you are an introvert, to feel like you can share these little tidbits without feeling like it's too much or too overboard. So those are some of my favorite things between messaging, like checking in on your messaging. Can I get a little bit more specific? And something like your word closet or your accessories closet to start to like bring a little bit more engagement to your content.
Awesome. Thank you. That was such a great breakdown. I should go back into CCS and revisit this. It's been a bit that I haven't gone back.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of making the most of the content, I remember there is one of the Copy Crush interviews where it is completely focused on repurposing. You
Mm-hmm.
have had some incredible guests talk about this. And by the way, for the listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, Copy Crush interviews are guest expert interviews that we get access to as part of CCS, which are again super helpful as the content covered in there spans from storytelling to launching to website copy and everything in between. So, could you please share a couple of repurposing tips that can help introverts avoid the content burnout?
Yes, absolutely. And I think whether you are an introvert, I'm an extrovert, right? Like I am recharged by being around other people. Like I always joke, I never need to be alone. Like I always joke, I say, even if I'm in the shower, like come in and talk to me and like, let's talk about Real Housewives. Let's talk about what's going on. Even for extroverts, the burnout of content is real. It is real. It's a lot out there. So this is such a great question that I think everybody can benefit from. So one of the things that I love to talk to people about is what I call the 6 post prompts. So the 6 post prompts is if you can use this for social, you can use this for email. So there's like 6 different, I'll give you an example of 2 of them, but there's like 6 different angles that can like help you come up with that content. So for example, one of them is authority. So this is where you can like teach a concept or teach something that is, for example, if one of my authority things I'm always talking about is that the best copy can't fix a moneyed message. I'm always talking about the importance of messaging, right? So if I'm talking about messaging, I might come for an authority post and give some specifics about why messaging is so important. So every time I get to authority in the 6 post prompts, I could repeat that, because the chances of somebody seeing that post or that is like it's actually like a lot less than we think. So we can just straight repurpose it, and then I'll give you some other ideas. But the 6 post prompts can be really helpful to just like get you out of your head and like in thinking. So another one is what we call lay down the law. And lay down the law is like if there's like a myth or something that you have to get people to understand, something that maybe people believe. So for example, I always like to talk about, people always be like, oh, you have to have a call to action at the end of all your emails. And I'm like, actually, you don't. You don't have to have a call to action. So when I get to like lay down the law in the 6 post prompts, I will emphasize, hey, listen, this is a myth you've been believing. You don't need to believe it. So I'll have like the list of my things I can talk about from authority, the list of my things from lay down the law. So every time I kind of cycle through the 6 posts and the 6 ideas, I can just kind of pick one of those, which makes it easier to create. And then once I have those, I can go back, and if something, for example, was a carousel post, let's say on Instagram, I might take that exact, not might, I will, I'll take that exact copy, and maybe that becomes a reel. So what was written, I just will now say. It's the same thing, but instead of it being in a carousel, it's now in a reel form, or the opposite. So that's one of my favorite things. I call it like a flip purpose. Like flip purpose. So if it was a carousel, can it be a reel? If it was a reel, can it be a carousel? As simple as that. And I will do that all the time, because we have to remember people need to see our stuff way more than we think. So we're like, oh my gosh, people are going to know I've repeated this. No, they don't know. And even if they do, it's okay, because people need to see things a lot in order for it to kind of settle in for them or resonate for them. So it's okay to repeat it in that way. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Another one is to give yourself themes. So this can really help as well. So for example, as you know, Seema, every year in October, we do what's called the Spooktacular series. And the Spooktacular series takes over all the content. It's how we use like classic, like Halloween movies, and there's business and copy lessons in there. Ghostbusters is one of them. The Addams Family, Casper, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I share this series every year. And it's the same series every year. It's the same emails. So every October, I'm like, oh, I can breathe, because I don't have to worry about it, because the Spooktacular series goes out. And if we've worked on throughout the year growing our audience, this is many people's first time seeing the Spooktacular series. But I have people who email me and be like, oh my gosh, this is my fourth time reading this email, my fourth year reading this email, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And every year I wait for it, because I always need this reminder. So giving yourself themes can really be helpful too. In March, I always do what's called the Marketing Madness series, which is like all the things online that, make me want to pull my hair out, all the things that drive me bananas. So I'll do what's called the Marketing Madness series. And sometimes I'll add in new things, but a lot of times it's repurposed from last year as well. Things that, were annoying me last year, probably still annoying me now. So I'll share them again. So think about giving yourself themes. Like, look at a given time of year and say, could I create like a series or a thing around this? And then I can bring it back or repurpose that in some way as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because that is, I mean, it is all a part of CCS, but it is not that easy for people to remember after I have the course and I
Yeah.
still feel like, oh my God, how could I forget about all of this? So, and social media, especially now, it's like so different than when we used to get content only from the people we were following. So maybe at that point it felt a little odd to repeat yourself, but now repetition actually works in your benefit, because that one piece of content that you created, whether it is in the form of reels or carousels, it takes time to create, irrespective of what kind of content. So you make it actually do the work that you created it for, by repurposing, by reusing, and by making sure that it gets as many eyeballs as possible. Because most of the introverts who are creating content, it's not fluff, it is created with a lot of thought, with a genuine desire to help. And by trying to not repeat it or not repurpose it, you're taking away that helpful thing that you're creating. So thank you
Yes.
so much for sharing all of this.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I'll say one more thing about that too, Seema, is sometimes too, like, let's say I've had a creative, because sometimes I'll be, which in full transparency, it's not right now. Lately, I'm like, I don't know, whatevs, do good copy, peace, like sometimes we just don't have it. We're in a creative funk, right? It's totally okay. But in times where I've been a little bit more prolific creatively and I have stuff, then when I'm in those funks, a lot of times I love to like write an email to my list that's like taking maybe from Instagram. It doesn't even have to be recently, like 3 posts that did really well, and just make that my email. Instead of feeling like I have to come up with a story or come up with something, it could be like picking a theme. Like, okay, I could write an email that's like, hey, Seema, so, a lot of people are always coming to me and they're struggling with their messaging and how to feel confident in their what I do statement, because as I always say, the best copy can't fix a muddied message. So here are 3 of my favorite Instagram posts where I break down a couple of ways where you can have a stronger what I do statement. This first one is great if you like video, it's a reel. This one's great if a carousel, if you're like more of a reader and a scroller. And like, here's also a bunch of great messaging. In this one, I like show messaging in real time. Check these out. And I could give those 3 links and boom, that's the email. That's the email.
And as a receiver of that email, I will tell you, like, even though I do spend time on Instagram, I had missed that content from you. And the only reason I got to check it out, got to experience it, was because you sent it in that email. I
Yes.
am just telling from experience of what you've done
Right. I
and
have
how
people
I've.
all the time will write to me and say, "Oh my God, I missed this or I didn't see it." So I cannot tell you how often, especially lately, when I've been in a creative funk, I'm like, let me just do, I call this like a roundup email. Pick one of the things that you teach about or talk about. Go back to it, and it could be anywhere. This could be Facebook, it could be LinkedIn, it could be YouTube, it could be a mix. It could be like, okay, here's something from Facebook, here's something from here. Here's an old email. Most of email providers, you can link back. You could link to like a previous email as well. So there's so many ways to send something and use stuff. And I'm telling you, that's so helpful for people, sometimes even more so than giving them a new idea or a new thought, because they get inside that email and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like digestible. I could pick one of these things and go look at. So just remember that whenever you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to create something today, I would ask you, how could you actually like repurpose, like look to see, could you repurpose something first before you feel like you have to create something brand new?
Yeah, yeah, it is especially helpful for introverts who I have heard from multiple ladies that creating content feels so overwhelming because I don't know what to say, and this instantly solves your problem of what to say.
Yes, yes. And that also comes down to really making a list of like your themes, I call it. And I think that also helps us because we're like, oh my gosh, I could talk about this, or I could talk about this, or I could say this. So something that we talk about in the society is how to come up. We call them your motifs, but they could be your themes, your motifs, whatever it is. And you really only need like 3 to 5. And so that's thinking about, if I use myself as an example, I say, okay, if somebody needs to be a great candidate to join the society, what are some of the things I need them to understand in order to be a great candidate? Well, the first, I feel like a broken record here today, is that the best copy can't fix a muddied message. I need them to understand the importance of messaging. So that's my motif number 1, is the best copy can't fix a muddied message. Okay. Second thing I need to have people understand is that personality matters in your copy, but it doesn't need to be where you're sharing your whole life story. So that's my second thing, is this personality in your copy. Okay. Third thing is around like the myth of consistency. Like people think, well, if I just post, shouldn't that be enough? And like we're missing that connection piece. Those are like 3 of my motifs. So I can just like go between those 3 things and talk about those 3 things only and then repurpose from there. And that keeps me like focused and zeroed in, as opposed to being like, oh my gosh, I should talk about this or I should talk about this. It's like, okay, let me just stick to my 3 motifs here. Because those are like the top 3 things that people need to understand to be a great candidate to work with me. So creating like your themes or your buckets can also really help with how overwhelming content creation is too.
Yeah, and for everyone who's listening and thinking, um, what do I do so that people convert from my content? This is gold, and you can get all of this, how to do these step by step in CCS, but you have to understand it's not about doing more and doing everything possible, because the online space, marketers especially, are interested in getting your attention, and that there are so many of them that as introverts we give our attention so freely. We don't have to. There's repurposing, there is understanding that you need to have you need to focus on those points that will help someone understand if they are the right fit for you, and then say yes to working with you or no and move on. That is all. So thank you so much for sharing so much with us. Before wrapping up, I know you're getting up for the next round of Copy Confidence launch. Please share with our listeners about the Leave 'em Wanting Masterclass. I want everyone to experience this with you before they consider joining CCS, because the course is amazing. Yes, there is no doubt about that. But the masterclass is in itself an amazing resource to learn how to convey your message, how to get your people's attention, and how to convert them in just about an hour and a half at most.
You nailed it, Seema. I feel like you nailed it. That's great. Yeah, it's why I created the class, because especially right now, and if you're out there and you're listening, like it's not your fault. Everybody is experiencing that it's taking people longer to make purchasing decisions. We're in what a lot of marketing experts are coining kind of a trust recession, and it's taking people a lot longer. Which is why I've always been, this preacher that your copy matters. But I would say now more than ever, because they're going to check out your social. They're going to look at your email. They're going to go to your website. All these touch points that maybe they didn't do last year or 2 years ago, they're doing now, which is why your copy matters so much. So in the Leave 'em Wanting More masterclass, we're going to give you what I call the 3-part framework to whip up irresistible copy with creativity and chutzpah. So we're going to talk about how to add more personality to your copy. We talked about a little bit about it today, but I'm going to teach you a system called the Copy Stars, which helps you kind of identify your copy personality so that you're never mimicking someone else's voice. We're going to run through the Proton Pack. I kind of gave you a crash course here, but we're going to run through the Proton Pack in there. And then the 6 post prompts, we're going to go even more in depth. And then I gave you a little bit of a sneak peek of that, but we're going to go in depth on that. And my goal is that you walk away feeling like a more confident creator for your business. And I will give you an opportunity to join the Copy Confidence Society, because I believe so strongly. That's my dog. If you hear that behind you, she also agrees. She agrees that you should come. But because I believe so strongly what we've created. But no matter what you decide, I know you'll walk away feeling like a more confident creator. And the class isn't pre-recorded. It's live with me. There's 3 dates and times to choose from. I always say it's like Broadway. You choose which time works for you, and I'll be there. And it's about 90. I say carve about 90 minutes. The class itself is about 60 minutes. But I always stay on for like 30 minutes to answer all of your questions. I'm there live with you to answer all of your questions, because I really just want to truly, especially this year, help as many business owners as I can, because these touch points are just needed now more than ever. So how can you make sure that you are really nailing it there in a way that doesn't suck all of your energy and take up all of your time? And that's what the gift that copy gives you. Even Seema, at the time of our recording, as you know, you were so flexible in rescheduling. I had the flu, bad, like the most sick I've ever been in my whole life. And it's like the show was still going on, because I still have copy and emails and things that people are reading, right? Even if I'm out and resting, there's still things that people can experience from me and have those touch points. And that's thanks to my copy. So that I could literally take from last Wednesday until today, which is at the time of this recording about it, so almost a week, to just lay in bed and like in a fevered haze. But my copy was still doing that work for me without me having to show up. And that's the power of that. And I just want to help as many people as I can with that. So we'd love to have you at the class. So fun.
Yes, absolutely. I want everyone listening to experience this with you before even like thinking about joining CCS, because it you're giving away a lot of things. It was very helpful the first time I listened. And honestly, that is exactly why I decided to come again, because many a times we attend masterclass and I've got everything. I don't have to listen to her, but I wanted to listen to you again.
Yeah,
I
and we
wanted
have
to.
people come back again. Like I'll see people that are the Tuesday and then they come back on Thursday. Because we pack a lot in there. So yeah, you can come to all 3. I'll be in a different, it's the same content, but you can come and maybe pay attention to one section a bit more than others. And I'm in a different outfit each time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're giving away the things, whatever you're giving, I mean, it takes time. It takes time. Honestly, CCS is not something that you breeze through. I am a breeze through kind of a person, and I couldn't. I had to take my time and do the work. And in fact, the first time I got the proton pack, I had to spend time in understanding how I'm. It is simple. I'm not saying it's complicated, but through the masterclass, I realized I had to pay attention and do this work so that I can really benefit from it. And CCS just made the entire process very comprehensive and simple. But again, I had to look at myself, and that is work. For me, that itself is work. I didn't have to
Yeah.
ask anybody, I didn't have to talk to anybody, just looking at myself. How do I speak? How do I refer to things? All of that was what made me realize, okay, I'm not that bad as I have been believing that I'm. Like, I used to think I'm not a copywriter, so I must be bad. But all of that work gave me so much confidence. So I want our listeners to be there, learn all of this, and definitely join CCS, because you will not find the confidence just by constantly consuming. You have to do the work. And Marisa, you make it so easy to do the work. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
thank
being
you.
here, taking time out when you've been so sick. I am really thankful that you could join us today. And honestly, this is one of, all my guests are amazing, but this is one of the most action packed conversations, because we
Mhm.
didn't just have a conversation. You shared so much with us. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you so much. This has been really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.